This is Research Like a Pro, episode 22, How to Find an Original Record. Welcome to Research Like a Pro, a genealogy podcast about taking your research to the next level, hosted by Nicole Dyer and Diana Elder, accredited genealogy professional. Diana and Nicole are the mother-daughter team at FamilyLocket.com and the creators of the Amazon best-selling book, Research Like a Pro, A Genealogist's Guide. I'm Nicole, co-host of the podcast. Join Diana and me as we discuss how to stay organized, make progress in our research, and solve difficult cases. Let's go. Welcome to Research Like a Pro today. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Diana.
And today we're talking about how to find an original record. Before we do that, we have a question from Jill. In your podcast, you invited questions about Native American research. I am a member of the Choctaw Nation and am trying to link my second great-grandmother's parents, born in Mississippi before relocation, to their families of origin. I am also trying to locate their graves in Indian Territory. We know their English names and birth years in Mississippi from the Dawes Rolls and the Choctaw Census. I recently located the father's Civil War records from the Choctaw Mounted Rifles in Fold 3. I have a theory from research into Civil War era records about his wife's given Choctaw name and English surname. I'm not sure, however, if there are other records I am missing. My goal is to verify her maiden name and, if possible, to trace both her family and her husband's families back to Mississippi. So what could we do to help Jill with this research question?
Well, this is kind of fun because we did our last episode all about the FamilySearch Catalog and discovering what kind of records and sources are available there. So when I just did a quick little keyword search for Choctaw Nation in the FamilySearch Catalog, it came up with 130 results of records. And scrolling down through it, I see that there are census records, but here's a collection called Court Records, Blue County, Choctaw Nation. And that's in Indian Territory, so court records might be one that would be helpful. There are also a lot of different history type things where people have written about their own ancestors, and sometimes those can have little clues to our people. I would just say go check out the catalog and see if there are some things there that might be just exactly what you need. When I did Choctaw Nation and then added cemetery, that came up with 7 results of just cemeteries. So I would say start with the catalog and see what's available there. And the other thing is to learn everything that you can about the locality. We've talked a lot about that. So if we have a locality in Mississippi that's known where they live, then just get really, really well versed in those records in that specific locality in Mississippi. And that will be a good start to getting going on this research problem.
Well, that ties in perfectly to the FamilySearch Catalog from last week and today's episode, which is about the FamilySearch Catalog helping us to find original records. So, Diana, tell us what we're going to talk about and why it's important to look at the original record.
The example that I use in the book, Research Like a Pro, A Genealogist's Guide, and I also use it in the study group in the eCourse, is my ancestress's sister. So my great-great-grandmother was Eliza Ann Eisenhower, and she had a sister on the census listed with her as named Texiana. And I was looking in the county, it was Bell County, Texas, for her marriage record. And it was an indexed book of marriage records up at the Family History Library. And I believe someone online had put Texiana with a man named Drake. And her last name wasn't Eisenhower, but I just thought, well, there's only one Texiana in this county in Texas, this time period. This has got to be her. And so I attached her to this man and attached the children and everything. And then a few years ago, I was looking at that same book again, that same derivative. I mean, just keep in mind, this was in our early years of research where we just didn't know as much as we know now. I was looking at that derivative list and I saw this second Texana on the page, and it had been indexed as Gochnour, Gochnour. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh my goodness, I wonder if that is Texiana Eisenhower. And they didn't have the original image or anything in this book, but I was at the library, and so I was able to go get the microfilm and look at it. And as soon as I looked at it, I recognized it was Eisenhower. But if you look at the image, it's really difficult to tell. I use this in classes, and nobody ever comes up with the right last name just because of the way their handwriting is. So if I hadn't been able to look at the original record, I would not have been able to figure out who Texana's correct husband was. And it turned out it was her stepbrother. They were living in the Blevins household, and she'd married Richard Blevins. And she had died right after that because he remarried about a year or two later. So I would have had Texana married to the wrong man if I hadn't gone to original records. So that's why I say we've got to get to original, do whatever we can to find the actual image of what the record is taken from.
So when you're searching in FamilySearch and you come across an indexed record, sometimes it says that there's an image attached. So you can click that and view the original image. But what do you do when you run across the dreaded no available image?
Well, that is when we have to try to figure out where to get to that image. And because a lot of those index records on FamilySearch give us the microfilm number, we can use that to go straight to the microfilm, and then we can find the image. The example that we're going to talk about today is from one of my client projects from a few years ago, and it's in England. We don't do very many English examples, so today we're going to do an English example. It was the exact same thing that you're talking about. This is a marriage record for Betty Cooper and Joseph Fielding, and the record was indexed, but it says no image available when FamilySearch brings it up. And so there's nothing to click on. I couldn't look at that. And I wanted to see if the information was all correct. I wanted to see if there was any extra information on the marriage record. It's really important in a client project and in our own research to look and see what else the indexer did not put on there. If you've ever done indexing, you know that there's just certain fields that you fill out. So let's say that the clerk who's recording this marriage to the side, to the margin of the page, put in something like Betty Cooper, daughter of so-and-so, to keep her separate from a different Betty Cooper. Well, the indexer would have no place to put that information. And so you wouldn't know that there was a little extra thing. And county clerks do that. They will make little interesting notes that help you. Anyway, with Betty Cooper's marriage record, there was right there on FamilySearch the exact film number. And so I was able to go and plug that into the FamilySearch catalog, and it came up with the film. And then you're going to get the actual result. And so what mine came up with was parish registers for St. Mary's Church, Oldham, Lancashire. So it gives the reference from the catalog. And this seemed to be the right thing because this was the place I was working in, Oldham, Lancashire, and it was parish registers. So I'm thinking, okay, I think this is the right film. And then when I clicked on it, there were 25 films in that main category of parish registers. So then I had to go down and find the exact film number. And when I did, I was really happy to see it was a camera icon and it wasn't locked. I could view that right from home. Like we talked about in our last episode, if it is a record that is locked, you'll have to travel to your Family History Center locally and look at that record. But in this case, it was open and I could look at it from home. So that was really, really helpful that I wouldn't have to go anywhere to find that. So Nicole, have you had some experiences doing this very same thing with your research lately?
There's a couple things I thought of. I have mentioned before when I looked at the original image of a paper from an estate file, I was able to read the handwriting that said the name of Lucindrilla instead of Drusilla, which somebody else had extracted from the image. So it was really difficult to read. But when I saw it, I knew that I was looking for Lucinda, who was married to George Welch. And so I saw George Welch and his wife blank, and it was really hard to read. And I looked at it for a while and thought it said Lucinda, but then it had an illa at the end. So I realized it was Lucindrilla. Anyway, so that was an example of having the original record. I was able to read it, whereas another person who wasn't familiar with the family couldn't read it and didn't know what it said, thought it said Drusilla. Another thing that I was thinking about was that in this recent project that I did, I found a will that was copied by the county court clerk, and he copied it from the original will, but the original will papers were also kept. And so I was able to find images of both the copy and the original will. And there was only one difference that I noticed, and that was the size of his land plot. And his land was listed as 217.5 acres in the one that was copied. And in the original will, it was 275 acres. So maybe that isn't a big difference, but it is kind of an interesting thing to think about. The fact that a copy of a will in a court record book can have some transcription errors, and it isn't a true original because it was copied over by a clerk. So even if it is created, a long time ago, sometimes there is a more original record that you can find, like the original will paper that was written by the man who was creating the will. And it can also give you the signature of the man. I guess that's just a little bit more about why you would want the original, because it gives you more accurate information.
It does. And the tricky thing is that a lot of those really original deeds or wills, they're gone. They're with the family. They've been destroyed long ago. So we get lucky every once in a while and find those. But usually we are looking at a recopied deed or a will in the county record book. And that's as original as we can get. But that is better than the next step, because every time you have something transcribed, you're going to have more room for errors. So that's a great example. I love that you were able to compare the original to what was in the county record book. I know a lot of people are a little afraid of clicking on those camera icons and getting to the actual microfilm, because it sounds really scary. You get to the microfilm, what in the world do you do then? Because you'll get little images of each page of the microfilm, and you've got to figure out where your specific record is. So if it's an indexed record that you're looking for, you should have an exact date. And in the example that we're talking about today with this marriage record, I did have that. I had an exact date. I had Betty Cooper, and she was married on 16 August 1847. So generally, these marriage records would be in order. And so, I could click one of the images and see that I was getting close to August of 1847, and then I could jump ahead a few spots and kind of narrow it down. One of the little tricks that not everybody realizes while you're looking at this microfilm on your screen is up in the top left corner, it will say image. So in this case, I went to the very first of the microfilm, so it's image of 501 of 533. So you're thinking, oh no, am I going to have to scroll through 533 pages to find this marriage record? Well, you can change the image number, which makes it so easy. So one of the tricks that I do is I go to number 1. I want to see the very beginning of the microfilm, because FamilySearch, when they sent out their digitizers or their microfilmers back in the day, they had the instructions to microfilm the front of the book. And so you'll get a little picture of the actual book, and you can use that for your source citation. You can put the actual name of the book in your source citation. And I think it's really fun anyway, just to look at the cover. You can tell that it's maybe a leather cover and it's been embossed or whatever, but it's fun just to see the original, what these records are coming from. So I do that first because I want to make sure I know what this is coming from. And then I just click ahead a couple to get an idea of where we are in time. This marriage record I'm looking for is 1847. So if I click on the next image and it's like an 1800 marriage record, every year is going to have several marriage records. So I would just change the image number. And so instead of looking at image 2 or 3, I would change it to maybe 300. And then I would see where I'm at. Maybe at image 300, I'm way past my year. Maybe I'm at 1870. So then I just narrow it. It becomes kind of a game. How fast can I narrow it down and find the record that I need? But knowing that you can actually just change the image number and don't have to click through each one can really make it seem much more doable. Again, we talk a lot about trying stuff out. So just go try it out and see how fast you can get to the record that you want.
That's exactly what I do as well with jumping around in the image numbers. And another trick is that if you notice that each image has one page, then that can help you estimate. Because sometimes if it has 2 pages, then you're going to jump by 2s. Every image will be jumping up 2 pages in the deed book or whatever book it is. Because sometimes they took an image of just one of the pages, but sometimes they took an image of both pages that are open, the whole spread. So if you notice that it's 2 pages in one image, then every time you go forward one image, you're jumping 2 pages forward. So keep that in mind when you're jumping through all of the images.
That's a really great point. And I also have to add that sometimes the books They don't make sense. Sometimes I have been looking at microfilm, either digitized or the Family History Library, and it takes me a while to figure out how they organized it. So for instance, when I was looking up your record, Nicole, for Lucindrella Keaton, it was for her father's estate. It took me a few minutes to figure out that they had alphabetized it. The microfilm was organized alphabetically by each person's surname. So I had to get to the K's for Keaton. And at first I was thinking, oh my goodness, so I'm going to have to look through thousands of images. I don't understand how they've organized this. I always recommend click around a little bit in it if it doesn't seem like it's making sense to you, and try to figure out how that county or the repository organize the records, because you're going to see all sorts of different variations of organization. And sometimes I'll think it's going to be so easy to find this land record, and then it's just wacky how it's organized. Have you had that happen?
In Rowan County, North Carolina, in their deed index, they had so many listings under Johnson, and they were going by year. So they would do all the Johnsons in 1847 and then start again with all the Johnsons in 1850. But then they ran out of space on the page. But then the next page was like not Johnson anymore. It was like moving on to the next thing. It was like Jon Jones. And so I had to search around for a while to find where they continued that index, and they just added it somewhere like 20 pages later. I hadn't found it at first, but then I was looking for another surname, and then I saw that the person who'd done the index had, on the left bottom side, on pages that had really short entries like the K's, KI's or something, they had added a bunch of entries from the J's and said continued from page 902. And so the person making the index had just ran out of space and flipped forward a few pages and found a new spot to write the Johnsons.
Which makes perfect sense.
The only problem is that they didn't write at the end of the page 902, go to page 1140.
Oh, that would have been so much more helpful if they if they had thought about us researching here 100 years later, right? Oh my goodness, that's a great example. I love that one. We should really make a list of all these crazy things and do something fun with that, because we do come up with some really interesting things from the records. Well, one thing that I need to let everybody know about who's delving into this world of searching the FamilySearch microfilm is that when the microfilmers went into a county, they had to fill up that microfilm. And so they would divide the different sections. They called them item numbers. And so you might have 7 items on one single microfilm, and they may not really relate to one another. You might have items 1, 2, and 3 are marriage records, and then items 4, 5, and 6 are land records, and 7 and 8 might be church records. So when you are looking at the FamilySearch Catalog entry for that, it will tell you the microfilm number, and then sometimes it will say an item number. You'll want to take note of that, because I have many times been searching through thinking, man, these page numbers just do not correspond. And then I realize that the record I want is item 2, and I'm looking in item 1. That happens to me a lot. So you have to be aware that there might be multiple sets of records on one single microfilm. The way you can figure that out is when you are looking at that microfilm and you see all the little images of the pages. What I like to do is scroll down until I see a big black square, and that means they always leave a big black square in between items. And so then you can go, okay, here's the next set of records. Here's set number 2. So again, it just takes a little bit of practice, experience working with these records, but it's so worth every single bit of effort you put into learning how to use it, because you're going to find the original stuff which will help you solve your problems.
So let's just review. So you come across a FamilySearch index that doesn't have an image attached. Then looking at the bottom, you see that the citation has a Family History Library microfilm number. You copy and paste the microfilm number into the catalog in the microfilm field, and then it takes you to the listing that has all the microfilms. And if they've been digitized, then you click on that camera next to that microfilm number, and that takes you to a big list of images. And you can click through those images one by one, or like we talked about, you can jump to image number 300 and see what year you're at and try to find it if it's chronological, or consider that it could also be alphabetical, like we mentioned. And then as you search through all those images, eventually, hopefully you'll hone in on the right image number and be able to find the actual image where that indexed record came from. Is that right?
Absolutely. And one thing I did not mention is after you've gone to all the work to find the actual image number, make sure that you are putting that in your research notebook or your research log. That should be part of your source citation. So you would have microfilm number, if it was a special item number, and then you'd have image number, because you really don't want to do that again. And what I do is I immediately capture the URL, put it in my research log, so that I have that in case I forget to do the image number or I mess up somehow. So, I like to try to cover my bases and have a couple of ways that makes it easy to get back to that record. And I also like to download it to my computer so that I have my own copy of it.
Very good. Well, I think that wraps up our episode for today. So if you have some indexed records that you need to go find the original for, we hope that helps you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know or email us. And just a reminder that you're always welcome to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher and ask a question in your review or email us your question so that we can answer it here on the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.
All right. Good luck in your research, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Research Like a Pro with Diana Elder, accredited genealogy professional, and Nicole Dyer. We hope that something you heard today will help you make progress in your own genealogy research. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or visit our website, familylocket.com, to contact us. You can find our book, Research Like a Pro, A Genealogist Guide, on Amazon.com and other booksellers. We hope you'll start now to research like a pro.